Welcome to the presentation of the paper Larger-scale Nakamoto-style blockchains don't necessarily offer better security. My name is Jannik Albrech. I'm a PhD student at Ruhr University Bochum in Germany, and this paper was joint work together with Sebastian Andreina from NEC Labs Europe, Fredrik Armknecht from University of Mannheim, Ghassan Karameh from Ruhr University Bochum, Georgia Marson from NEC Labs Europe, and Johan Willingman from Ruhr University Bochum as well. First, I want to start with the motivation behind our work. We in our paper were wondering, given two blockchains, B1 and B2, whereas B2 is an extended form of B1 where nodes have been added to the network, which of those two blockchains offers stronger security? Now, if you want to compare the security of B1 and B2, we can apply the security condition from one of the latest works. For this purpose, we take the security condition by Dembo et al. From CCS 20. Here, in this condition, rho adv denotes the adversary's power, rho on the honest user's power, delta the maximum internal delay in the network, lambda the block rate, and e is some scaling factor. We observe that rho adv has to be smaller than the fraction on the right side. Further, we see that the delta is occurring in the denominator of the right term. Therefore, we come to the conclusion that increasing the network delay delta yields weaker security guarantees. However, this goes against the intuition that increasing the number of nodes in the network should have a beneficial effect on the security due to the reduced risk of the network's majority of nodes being corrupted. We now come to the contributions of our paper. Here, we first identified a gap in existing security models, namely the effect of an increase in security as the blockchain grows in size. This results in having two opposing forces, namely, one, the security decreases over increasing delays, and second, the security increasing due to the distributed power. As a second contribution, we reconciled these two opposing forces by a theoretical analysis on the security over the network scale. Third, we conducted an empirical large-scale evaluation to determine the function delta as a function of the network scale n. Let me now motivate the effect of an increase in security when the network grows in size. For this purpose, we reconsider the example from previous slides where we have our networks B1 and B2. Let's now suppose that all nodes in a network have equal power. Therefore, all nodes in network B1 control 1/3 of the network's power, where all nodes in B2 control 1/6 of the network's power. Further, let's now suppose we are facing an adversary who can corrupt a fixed number of nodes. For instance, let's say the adversary can corrupt 2 nodes in both networks. This is based on the assumption that each node has an individual chance of being corrupted of P star, whereas P star is independent of the network scale n. Then, the respective adversary can accumulate 2/3 of the network's power for blockchain B1, whereas the same adversary would only accumulate 1/3 of the network's power for blockchain B2. Therefore, due to the fact that B2 consists of more nodes than B1, it has some advantage in terms of security compared to blockchain B1. Now, after motivating this effect, we see a gap in existing security models. Namely, established models do not capture the robustness that we gain due to the increased network scale. This leaves us with two opposing forces. Namely, on the one hand, we have the decreasing security due to increasing delays when we increase the network scale. On the other hand, we have an increase of security due to the decreasing likelihood of the blockchain's node getting corrupted. Before we dive into the security analysis, I want to first introduce the security model considered in our paper. In our security model, each node is initially considered to be honest and can individually be corrupted with a success rate P star. In other words, an adversary attempts to corrupt each node individually and succeeds with success rate P star for each node. Further, we define the adversary's power rho adv to not be a priori bounded, which means that the adversary is technically allowed to corrupt the entire network. Also, we allow the adversary to leverage state-of-the-art network attacks to delay the block propagation by up to 5 block times. This is based on the findings of previous work. In fact, the results of this previous work shows that an adversary can even go beyond and delay the block propagation for even more block times. We now come to the theoretical analysis of our paper. Here I want to introduce two functions, f and g, whereas each of those functions capture the effect of one of those two opposing forces. First, the function f. This one denotes the probability to corrupt exactly I out of n nodes in our network. Second, the function g denotes an upper bound on the number of corrupted nodes that can be tolerated by our network while still being secure. This function is derived from rearranging the security condition by Dembo et al. From CCS 20. Then we want to introduce a third function, which is reconciled from the previous two functions and which denotes the security metric of our paper. We use this function to evaluate and analyze the security of blockchains in various settings. In fact, these three functions are captured by our main theorem of our paper, which states that the probability of a Nakamoto-style blockchain being secure can be derived as follows. Here in this function, we see the function p of n being the sum of function f and g. Namely, the term in the argument of our sum is our function f, and the term in the upper bound of the sum is our function g. Here I want to point out that our function g of n consists of two parts, namely n-val, which denotes the number of validators in our network, and ρ_max, which denotes the maximum fraction of power that the adversary can corrupt in our network. ρ_max is defined below, and we observe that it is a function of the network's delay delta. As a next step, and in order to capture both effects of our two opposing forces, we now wonder how can we characterize delta of n as a function of the network scale n. In our theoretical analysis, we showed the expected maximum delay delta of n in our blockchain network with exactly n nodes can be approximated by the function delta of n being equal to a times log of n plus b for two constants a and b. These two constants depend on various parameters of the respective blockchain deployment, and in order to determine those two, we run large-scale simulations to interpolate a and b. For these simulations, we used the SimBlock simulator, which is an open-source simulator implemented in Java. It is designed to evaluate the block propagation in real-world blockchain networks. As the publicly available simulator features severe scalability limitations when it comes to simulating large-scale networks, we modified and extended the simulator. Our modifications to the SimBlock simulator were as follows. Originally, SimBlock was limited to simulating networks of at most 70,000 nodes. The following modifications allowed us to significantly increase the performance of the simulator. First, the accuracy of the difficulty parameter has been limited. We bypassed that issue by encoding only the relative block generation power of each node instead of the absolute power. Second, we extended the simulator by implementing the hybrid and the direct push gossip protocol, and we revised the implementation of the compact block protocol as SimBlock did not consider the transaction transmission time. Third, we extended the tool by incorporating network layer tags by adding delays to the inter-node communication. Finally, we optimized the memory and the event timeline. In our measurements, we evaluated the impact of 1. The number of validators and mining pools in our network. 2. The impact of state-of-the-art network attacks that allow the adversary to delay the block propagation by up to 5 block times. And third, the impact of real-world factors such as the gossip protocol, the block size, and also the block rate. Or in other words, the impact of different Nakamoto-style blockchains on the security of the respective blockchain network. In our analysis, we compared the security of 4 common Nakamoto-style blockchain deployments, namely Cardano, Monero, Ethereum Classic, and Bitcoin. Here, I want to give you an overview of the gossip protocols used by those 4 deployments. The gossip protocol defines the inter-node communication when it comes to propagating blocks and transactions from node to node throughout the network. Let's start with Cardano. Cardano uses a variant of the advertisement-based block propagation. Here, a node A, upon receiving a block, first advertises it to all its neighbors, for instance, node B. If node B is missing the advertised block, it requests the block by sending a getData message. This getData message is then answered by node A with the block itself. Monero, on the other hand, utilizes a variant of the direct push block propagation. Here, a node A, upon receiving a block that it has not seen before, directly forwards it to all its neighbors. Third, we have the hybrid push block propagation, as it is, for instance, deployed in the Ethereum Classic blockchain. This one is a combination of the previous two gossip protocols. Here, a node A, once it receives a block, first checks if a node is part of a specific subset. If B is part of this subset, then A immediately forwards this block as it is defined in the direct push protocol. Otherwise, if B is not part of this specific subset, then A uses the advertisement-based protocol. Finally, as the fourth gossip protocol that we consider in our analysis, we use the gossip protocol as it is utilized in the Bitcoin blockchain. This one is also another variant of the advertisement-based block propagation, but it is using the compact block mode. Here, node A, once it receives a block, again advertises it to node B. Node B then can request the data, and node A responds to this request by sending a compact form of the block. Now we come to the experiments that we conducted in our paper and their results. First, we empirically evaluated the maximum delay in networks of various sizes. For this purpose, we conducted a series of simulations of Nakamoto-style blockchain networks and determined the maximum delay in the network by averaging over 100 blocks. Based on these measurements, we used linear regression to interpolate the delay as a function of the network scale. Here, in the figure on the left, you can see the delay delta as a function of the network scale for our 4 deployments. For instance, you can observe that the delay for the Cardano deployment increases way steeper than it does for the Bitcoin deployment. If we now take a look at the table on the right, we observe the delay as a function as we characterized it before, where we now determined the coefficients A and B. Namely, the first coefficient is A and the second coefficient is B, which we can now plug in our equation delta of n being equal to A times log of n plus B. Now that we have determined the delay as a function of the network scale, we can now plug it into our security metric P of n that we defined on some slides before. Here, in this plot, we evaluate the security metric for the Cardano deployment with a chance of each node being corrupted of P star being equal to 12.5%. Furthermore, the adversary can leverage state-of-the-art network layer attacks to delay the propagation of blocks by up to 5 block times. Here, our observations are as follows. First, we observe the security is increasing over the network scale until a turning point is reached for approximately 20,000 nodes. Then, afterwards, the security eventually degrades with increasing delays until it reaches 0. It is very surprising to see that adding nodes to networks of reasonable size impairs and even reduces their security. Next, we observe the security metric being evaluated over the network scale and compared for the 4 blockchain deployments. We notice that the turning point for Cardano and Ethereum Classic are way smaller than expected. On the other hand, the turning point for Bitcoin and Monero is out of bounds for the shown plot here. This indicates that adding nodes to those networks might not impair the security for reasonable network sizes. In fact, we observe that the turning point highly depends on the gossip protocol, but also on the block size and the block rate of this respective blockchain deployment. As the last part of our selected outcomes that we want to share in this talk, we show the empirically measured real-world delays and their comparison to the upper bound of the delays that we derived by rearranging the security metric P of n. Here, the solid lines show the measured delays when the internode block propagation is delayed by 600 seconds in blue and 3000 seconds in orange. This is equal to delaying of the block propagation by 1 and 5 block times respectively, based on state-of-the-art network attacks. Further, the dashed lines denote the maximum network delays that the network can tolerate to still achieve security when facing an adversary that can corrupt each individual node with success rate P star being equal to 0.3 in brown and 0.4 in violet. Here, the plot on the right shows that a network which is attacked by an adversary can leverage network attacks that delay the block propagation by 600 seconds, yields delays that cannot yield secure system when p star is larger than 0.3. Furthermore, the same applies to network attacks that delay the block propagation by 3000 seconds and when p star is equal to 0.4. These results shockingly reveal that some networks are facing serious issues that are breaking the security guarantees when being attacked by state-of-the-art network layer attacks. We now come to a selection of the key takeaways of our paper. We, in our paper, identified a gap in existing security models, namely an unknown increase in the security of a network due to the reduced likelihood of a network's nodes getting corrupted when the network grows in size. Second, we showed that real-world delays significantly increase with the network scale, and further, we observe a high impact of the gossip protocol on this effect. Third, we show that the Cardano and the Ethereum Classic deployment are vulnerable to adversaries that can corrupt each node individually with p star larger than 29% and when the network size is larger than n larger than 10 to the power of 6 nodes. Finally, we show that the compact block relay, as it is introduced in the BIP 152, significantly increases the robustness of the network. For example, when an adversary has a success rate of corrupting each node individually of 47% or higher, and when the network is larger as 10 to the power of 9 nodes, the network can still be secure.